Believe it or not, there was a time when the Furby was one of the most in-demand items in the United States. People were going crazy over it. If you've ever seen the movie Jingle All the Way, where Arnold Schwarzenegger is searching everywhere to find his son a Turbo Man doll in time for Christmas, well, the real-life 1998 version of the Turbo Man doll was the Furby. It was unbelievable. Without exaggeration, people were getting trampled in stores, fighting with employees, knocking over displays. They were acting like animals. Some of them were caring parents, trying to get their kids the toy that they wanted for Christmas, but others saw it as an investment because there was such an inflated secondary market that people were reselling them for more than 10 times the retail price. Here's a great example I found from a Canadian news broadcast. They interviewed this woman who stood in line at a toy store for hours so she could buy 2 Furbies and then resell them. She actually said that she thought it'd be a good way to earn money toward renovating her home, which sounds absurd, but evidently she received offers of up to $650, meaning that this toy was so in demand that people were willing to pay more than 15 times its original $30 to $35 price tag. Remember, that was in late 1998, and by 2002, sales had fallen so much that they discontinued them altogether. They have since come out with new lines and editions of them with varying success, such as the 2015 Furbaka. Oh my gosh, but none of them have even come close to the frenzy that was happening in the late 1990s. I would say qualifying it as a major fad. So the big question that we're all thinking right now is, what was going on there? Why was it so special? What made it so attractive? So I want to try to answer those questions while identifying some of the main reasons as to why the Furby was so successful. This really is a case of everything just perfectly coming together. The main inventor of the Furby was David Hampton, who I would describe as a natural-born electronic engineer. As a young child, his neighbors would take their broken radios to him and he would fix them for money until he was 13 when he started working in a TV repair shop. Directly after high school, he served 8 years in the US Navy working with electronics, then spent more than a decade making toys and games for various companies. He was even one of the designers of the popular arcade game Q*bert. By the 1990s, he had started his own company that in February of 1997 led him to go to the annual Toy Fair trade show in New York, and he saw something there that gave him the initial idea for the Furby. I don't know if you remember this, the Tamagotchi. It was this little $20 keychain that was essentially the first popular digital pet. It had these meters where you had to play with it to keep it happy and feed it so it wouldn't go hungry. It was pretty cool. It was released in Japan in late 1996, where it quickly became popular, and the same thing happened when it was released in the US about 6 months later. But this toy show that David Hampton was attending was between those two release dates, so that demonstration was the first time that he and many other people in the US had seen it. He liked the idea, but thought that the biggest weakness of it was that it wasn't tangible. In his words, it was a pet that you couldn't pet, so he set out to make one that you could. And I have to recognize Caleb Chung as a co-creator of the Furby, because this is part of what I mean about everything coming together. David had worked with Caleb at Mattel in the 1980s, and they were actually together that day at the toy show seeing the Tamagotchi for the first time. It seemed like they were on the same page from the beginning and worked together to create the first Furby. Here's a picture of it. David was more responsible for the scripting and programming, while Caleb took control of the mechanics. I'm not going to get too specific about it, but it was considered to be an impressive piece of technology at the time. It was a great partnership, using their respective talents to work toward a common goal, but the part where they had trouble was licensing the product. They had tried multiple times with multiple companies and couldn't work out a deal until Richard C. Levy joined the team. Again, maybe the perfect person. He had started his career in film promotion. He was the one in charge of the campaign to promote The Odd Couple in 1968, among dozens of other films. Then in the 1980s, he started inventing toys in his spare time. So given his experience with business, promotion, invention, and toys, he understood the product, and in November of 1997 was able to make a licensing deal with a toy company called Tiger Electronics, which yet again may have been perfect. They were among the biggest companies that specialized in electronic toys, much like the Furby. In fact, their most popular toy at the time was the Gigapet. I think we can describe the Gigapet as sort of a cheaper wannabe version of the Tamagotchi. The Gigapet and the Tamagotchi were actually released in the US in the same week, with the Gigapet being about half the price, $10 compared to $20. When Tiger Electronics acquired the rights to the Furby, I believe they may have even had plans of releasing it as a tangible sequel to the Gigapet.
Furby, the first Gigapet you pet.
To start my list of how the whole Furby fad happened, I think it's pretty clear that they were trailing the success of the already existing fad of digital pets. The idea itself came from seeing the Tamagotchi, and they were ultimately produced by the company that made Gigapets, potentially even meant to be branded that way. The market for this kind of thing was strong, and they took advantage of it by offering a new and unique twist to it. My next reason behind this fad is the people who made the Furby, and there's a few different ways we could look at this. The individuals, of course, the natural-born electronic engineer that teamed up with this mechanical engineering genius and then adding a promotional wizard, all of whom knew about toy making and shared a similar vision for the project, but also the companies that were behind it as well. Tiger Electronics, as I said, was already a leader in making similar electronic toys, but there's another layer to it. Less than 4 months after making that deal to license Furby, Tiger Electronics, the entire company, including that Furby license, was bought by Hasbro for $335 million. Throughout the 1990s, Hasbro and Mattel were in this competing acquisition spree. I talk about it in a different video, but Furby got caught up right in the middle of it. Think about that. A few months earlier, 3 guys were working on the project from their homes, and now they were utilizing the resources of the second largest toy company out there. They spent months improving and perfecting it, and by October of that same year, 1998, they introduced it to the public in time for the holiday season, and that is where things went crazy. The president of Tiger Electronics told Levy that he would consider the project to be a success if they sold 250,000 Furbies within the first year. They actually ended up selling 4 million of them in the final 3 months of 1998, an additional 14 million of them in 1999, and by the end of the original run in 2002, they had sold 40 million of them in total. In early 1999, there was this big McDonald's promotion where these little toys called McFurbies were put in Happy Meals. Later on, they released a new line of them called Furby Babies. They had some minor differences, but they were mainly a smaller version of the original. And I have to mention this, in 2001, once the popularity had already started to fade quite a bit, they put out the Shelby, which I can only describe as a clam version of a Furby. To me anyway, it looks like a crazy attempt to stay relevant. No offense to the Shelby fans out there, but I really feel like they came up with the name of this one before they designed it. Alright, my next reason on the list is very polarizing, one of the most debated issues of our time, so try and keep it calm when I say that I think these are adorable. I already know that the comment section is going to be filled with people saying that it's terrifying, and I can see where you're coming from. They do walk that line. They have those big eyes like an owl, and then the rest of them is all furry and cat-like. The name Furby is derived from the word furball. Things tend to get a little sketchy whenever this topic is brought up, but the overall design, it has to be derived from Gizmo from the 1984 movie Gremlins. Well, on December 22nd, 1998, during the height of the craze, Variety reported that Warner had sued Hasbro over the likeness and that they had reached a 7-figure undisclosed settlement. But then, 2 days later, on Christmas Eve, a spokeswoman from Warner clearly stated, "There is not a lawsuit and there is no settlement. We have a good working relationship with Hasbro." So that's conflicting. And then in 2000, Hasbro and Warner teamed up to release an official Gizmo Furby that was said to be voiced by the actual voice of Gizmo, which would be Howie Mandel. Then in 2015, during an AMA on Reddit, Joe Dante, the director of Gremlins and Gremlins 2, The New Batch, said, "Producer Mike Finnell and I noticed a certain similarity between Furby and Mogwai and pointed it out to Warner Bros. Soon there was a Gizmo Furby for sale, and no doubt some settlement money had changed hands." I told you, it gets sketchy. According to Variety and Joe Dante, there was a settlement, but according to an official Warner spokesperson at the time, there was not. Let me know what you make of the situation, but considering that the Furby looks very much like one of the cutest characters in cinematic history, I'm going to go ahead and say that his adorable appearance contributed to the fad. My final reason behind it may be the biggest, and I think the creators would mostly agree with me on this. The Furby was incredibly lifelike. When you first got it, it spoke its own language. It was called Furbish. It was a mixture of Hebrew and Japanese and all these other languages that David Hampton had learned while traveling in the Navy. But the genius of it was that as time went on, it was set to unlock more and more English words, making it appear that it was learning as you spoke to it. The Furby would laugh if you touched its belly, and it would get scared if you turned it upside down. You always felt so bad for it when that happened. To make him go to sleep, it wasn't a simple on and off switch, because that wouldn't be lifelike. You would have to put him in a dark room or cover his eyes, and it didn't happen instantly. Sometimes it took a while for him to fall asleep. And if you didn't do it and just set him down, he would continue to make noises on his own. All of these features features that made it so lifelike were, in my opinion, also the things that made it incredibly annoying. I can tell you personally that after hearing it so much just during the process of making this video,
a quiet slumber party.
I just don't want to hear it anymore. I'm sure that I would feel the exact same way if I had to take care of a real noisy critter like this. So ironically, the thing that made Furby so attractive and fun in the first place was the same thing that made it so intolerable. Now I want to point this out. A few years ago, I made a video about the Cabbage Patch Kids. It was a different fad from the 1980s, and there are some similarities that I've noticed. Obviously, they both caused a big frenzy where people were hurting each other to buy them, but also much of their appeal stemmed from the realism of taking care of something. The Cabbage Patch dolls even came with their own adoption papers to make them seem real. They both have controversy surrounding whether or not the design is based on an existing design, but to me, the strangest similarity is the debate on whether or not they are cute or terrifying. That seems like a strange debate to be repeating, and for the record, I come down on the side of terrifying for the Cabbage Patch dolls, but many people will disagree with me. So after looking at all these qualities, I think it would be accurate to describe the Furby fad as a combination of the Cabbage Patch fad and the Tamagotchi fad. Let me know if you agree with that, and also let me know in the comments, what do you think about Furbies? Are they fun or are they annoying? Are they adorable or are they terrifying? Were you part of this fad? Hopefully you didn't buy one for over $600, but if you owned one in the late 1990s, what made you want it so bad and what made you stop playing with it? And any other thoughts you have about Furbies, leave them in the comments. I'd like to hear what you have to say. Thank you for watching.